Gavi, you're in our neck of the woods in Providence. Where do you teach or work?
I'm actually, as you can see by the disarray behind me, I'm actually in the process of moving to Simsbury, Connecticut.
Oh,
I'm their new director of lifelong learning. But at this moment, I am in Providence.
nice. Well, still in our backyard. Lovely to see you. Lovely to have you. Cindy, nice to see you.
Hi, Marion.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
So
Cindy's
good.
come to support Tal and I think. That's so nice of her. Thank you, Cindy.
Very excited to be here.
Awesome.
And it's
as
so
we're
wonderful to see you, Marion.
You too, Cindy. I've been following your exploits. Welcome everybody. As we're getting, as the last few people are coming in, or the last few people that are on time are coming in, put in the chat, please, where you physically are, what city, state, country. And in a second, I'm going to formally welcome everybody. Yeah, okay, so no one else is coming in right this minute, so I will formally welcome everybody to our April workshop through our Matarot Professional Development. It's so wonderful to see you all. I am very excited about today's session with our colleagues from Hebrew at the Center. I'm sure many of you are here because of their renown and because of this topic, which is a never-ending challenge in Jewish education. So without further intros, I'm going to turn it over to Tal and Lori to tell us a little bit about Hebrew at the Center and about themselves, and to get started as the people are still coming in. Hi, everyone. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Robin. Hi, Tova. Nice to see everybody. Madeline. Okay, Tal and Lori, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you so much for having us and for inviting us to this series. Thank you for all the participants for joining. We're very excited for this session. Lori and I will introduce ourselves briefly and then jump into this topic. My name is Tal Gale. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Hebrew at the Center. The goal or the mission of Hebrew at the Center really is to raise the profile and the bar for Hebrew internationally and specifically in North America. I just wanted to share with this particular group that I was introduced to Jewish education when I was 18 through Kesher in Cambridge. And so my introduction to the American Jewish world and to Jewish education proper happened through a supplementary school setting. And here I am a few years later, still in Jewish education, still in Hebrew education. And I owe that a lot to my initial experience of really being part or being let into a wonderful community. So I'm excited to be talking about this topic with this particular audience. Lori, will you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I have friends on the screen and I'm so excited to see some of them. Ron, it's so lovely to see you. I wish it was in 3D, but it is such a pleasure to be working with colleagues again. I only pray that it'll be in person sooner rather than later. My name is Lori Sagarin. I have been a Jewish educator for almost 40 years. I am a product of a supplementary school. And there I actually learned my love of Judaism, Hebrew language, spent a number of years living in Israel, went to the University of Wisconsin where I was a Hebrew major, went to Hebrew Union College where I got my master's in Jewish education, and Hebrew has always been my thing. About 14 years ago, I joined the team of the iCenter as their expert on Hebrew and supplementary education, although I continue to run a school full-time in Skokie, where I have been serving for, I am completing my 27th year. I am the longest serving HUC graduate in any job. I don't know if that's something to be celebrated, or I brought in Betsy Stone yesterday for an in-person seminar. Those of you who don't know Betsy, you should Google her. She's amazing. And she said to me, we're boomers, we're very similar in age. She said, nobody stays in jobs anymore. I said, I know, I am literally a dying breed and they will carry me out and no one will ever take this job for as long as I have. But Hebrew has always been my passion. And just over, I think, a year and a half ago, in the midst of the pandemic, I joined Hebrew at the Center as a consultant, also with an eye to supplementary education. And I'm so excited to be teaching colleagues this morning. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Lori. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. We wanted to share our goals for this session. So our goals are as follows. We're going to discuss the purpose and importance of having a clearly articulated Hebrew mission, Lama Ivrit. We're going to explore how Hebrew Infusion might be leveraged and what can be accomplished for students in supporting feelings of success in teachers. We're going to be sharing resources for bringing fun and interactive techniques into your classroom or Zoom room. And finally, we're going to provide opportunities to share best practices and methodologies that can be implemented immediately in your schools, either by yourself as the leader.
In Jewish education?
Excuse me?
Oh,
okay. So we're going to,
everyone mute yourself, please.
So we're going to be actually asking everyone to also engage in this conversation and look forward to really a conversation. Lori and I really prepared this as a dialogue. So our first request of you or activity will be just as a opening and getting to know each other and getting into our topic. Might you please in the chat share the reason or reasons that you are teaching Hebrew at your school? Lama Ivrit in your supplementary school or complementary school. And I just want to say a caveat that this is true for right now at this moment at 12:06 p.m. Eastern, not holding anyone's feet to the fire. This is just an activity. So please just share and your opinion may change later today or in a year from now. So let's see what we have in terms of Lama Ivrit. Please share. I see, excellent. Thank you already. Passion for language. Love teaching children. It's the language of the Jewish people. Hebrew is part of our Jewish identities. To have a connection to the past. Small contribution to fighting anti-Semitism. Hebrew connects Jewish people over time and space. Connection to tefillot. It's the language that binds all Jews across space and time. A way to have our students be part of the Jewish story. It's a part of the religious school curriculum. Hebrew is a language of the Jewish people. It's a way for students to have authentic and a portable connection to Jewish values. It's a traditional language of prayer and part of being Jewish. Virtual teaching, reaching students all over. It's maybe something that we can leverage now. Hebrew is a part of Jewish living and learning for prayer, fluency, and confidence. Let's keep reading. I'd like people to share if they can. What do you see in the comments of this group? Are there trends? Are there things that surprise you? Are there, what is your reaction to what we see our colleagues saying? Or when you kind of review this list.
Feel free to unmute and share. So I'll start. I am fascinated by the number of people who identified Hebrew as a link towards identity. I'm happily surprised to see that, because it's certainly where I sit in big part. And I'm glad that I have a lot of other people here who feel the same way. I'd love to hear what others think.
Thank you, Lauren. So one of the, Shira, did you want to say something? Okay. So I just want to, or Dina, I see Dina maybe wanted to say something. No. Okay. The good news here is there's no right or wrong answer. Your Lama Ivrit is your Lama Ivrit. And it's important to articulate. So what we do want to share with you is, I've been asking this question in multiple settings for the past 8 years of particularly school leaders, but also students, parents, lay leaders, in order to really understand why are people teaching Hebrew and Jewish education specifically. And the purpose of asking that question is in order for us to be able to be intentional. If we don't know Lama Ivrit, why Hebrew, we won't know Ech Ivrit, how Hebrew. So kind of making the link between, if we are really able to articulate why we are doing something, it then helps us be more directed and intentional in our very limited time with students. So we want to share with you what we have found to date in terms of the most common Lama Ivrit that we find in across the board Jewish educational settings. And these are the top 8 categories: a connection to Jewish tradition, being able to communicate with Hebrew speakers, Hebrew, as Lori mentioned, Hebrew is a part of Jewish identity, language of the Jewish peoplehood or the Jewish people, having access to Jewish texts. That was mentioned a number of times also here in the comments. There's an element of second language neural development, which we didn't hear come up in these comments. A connection to Israel or Israeli culture, and a vessel for Jewish values, which I also felt the values was also something that was prevalent in your comments. So you are all, from what I understand, leaders in a real sense in the school, be it in a formal position, be it a formal position or a drive. In your schools, let me ask you, who should be determining the Lama Ivrit of the schools that you work in? You know, who should we be asking this question? What voices are critical to the conversation? And we've already decided that there's no right answer, but for your school, who would you like to be part of that dialogue? Or is already part of that dialogue? Like what other constituents?
Tal, people are putting in the chat some of their responses to the question, if you want to take a look.
Excellent, thank you. So Barbara is sharing that, sorry, Barbara, I lost my, that actually engaging kids and families and understanding their Lama Ivrit is critical. Rabbi Intraub, excuse me if I mispronounced, shared specifically reaching out to rabbis, teachers, the school committee. Dina shared all stakeholders, especially faculty, students, and parents. Yes, 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 and yes. If we want people to, my experience and our experience is if you want people to engage, they need to be involved or understanding why they are doing what they're doing. And if they can help inform it, all the more so. I do want to share with you a tool that I use on a regular basis in my work. And it's a tool that I use to facilitate conversations about Lama Ivrit. So if you would want to take this concept, this idea of Lama Ivrit and bring it back to your school, one is you can always do the activity we did at the beginning if you really just want to elicit some feedback and ask people, Lama Ivrit. But I do want to share with you a tool that was, it is a product of work by Rosov Consultants. It's specifically work done by Plomson Wertheimer. And they wrote a report in 2000, I want to say 17, I can, 2017. And they shared this tool. It's a conceptual framework for specifying the purposes of Hebrew. And what they did is they kind of created a quadrant of sorts to look at Hebrew. And I'm just going to review this quickly, and then we can talk about it for a few minutes. And in their model, they separated out, for the purposes of this activity, modern Hebrew from classical Hebrew. And they also separated out symbolic reasoning versus practical reasoning. So let's just take a moment. I'm going to share a little bit what we've learned from this tool, but I wonder if people are comfortable looking at this chart and either writing in the chat or sharing out loud. If you had to choose one or two of these boxes of this Lama Ivrit, what would you choose? How would you choose? If you can't choose, why is it a challenge? How do you grapple with this particular tool?
Tao, we were asked to re-ask the question.
Thank you. So the question, thank you, Lori. The question is, might you, if you're comfortable, actually share in which of the, where do you fall in terms of Lama Ivrit? Modern, classical, symbolic, practical, in terms of, is it, are you interested because you are interested in helping students make aliyah? Are we focusing particularly in being able to lead prayers? Like, which of these seems to be to you to be the most critical in your work? Again, there's no right or wrong, it's just different answers. Or how, you know, or what's your feedback on this chart? Is this a helpful tool? Is this interesting? Does this make more order? Is it more confusing?
I could share something. Hi,
Please.
I'm Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I think it's a great chart because I started now looking at this through the lens of like the values of our synagogue, and that, you know, I wrote in the chat of Hebrew connecting us over time and space. But now when I look at this chart and I think of our synagogue, there are boxes here that are really about building community. The idea of like feeling part of a synagogue, of feeling comfortable when a service is in Hebrew, you know, allowing you to feel part of the group in situations where people sprinkle Hebrew into English. So like there's a theme here that can be based on different values that your institution holds, you know, holds dear.
Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. So it's a good tool to reflect on in terms of where you are and maybe where you want to kind of pinpoint some kind of next steps. Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. I will say go ahead.
I just want you to notice that there are a lot of comments in the chat that might be worthwhile taking a look at.
Okay, thank you. I see that Rabbi Luit is interested in students feeling confident, engaged in experience. And for that reason, I'm most interested in the classical text box. Okay, that's very helpful because in this particular case, we can kind of see where maybe the focus should be for this kind of work. Dina says, almost all the boxes work for me. I teach both modern and classical Hebrew, and both meet specific needs of my students. So as I said before, there's no wrong answer. I do think it's important to engage in the conversation. I did lead a similar conversation about 2 weeks ago, and someone in the group said, but I want to do all of this. I don't want to choose from all of these. We want our students to be able to feel all of these things and be able to do all of these things. And my answer to her was this: we all do. And we have limited time, we have limited resources, and we have limited attention from our constituencies. So if we can hone in, articulate what direction we're going in for now, do a little bit of work, assess, and then come back to this conversation, we can slowly make sure that we're succeeding and getting to getting closer to our goals. As Laurie said, I think earlier in the opening, this is hard work. This is a challenging field, but the more we can be intentional, the more we can include others in why we're doing what we're doing, we believe will increase success in whatever that looks like in your particular institution. So with that, I want to turn over the presentation to Lori, and I'm just unsharing my screen.
So we're going to move a little bit from the practical to from the theoretical to the practical. Hold on, I'm just going to make sure I can share my screen. Here we go. So as I mentioned in the introduction, can you guys see my screen now? Yes? Okay. I have been working for the last 14 years with the iCenter in their Hebrew department. For those of you who aren't familiar with the iCenter, they are the hub of Israel education in North America. Happens to be housed here in Chicago, but it is an international organization with staff literally all over the world. And over the last several years, we have worked hard to create resources that we think are practical and useful in Hebrew settings. That doesn't mean necessarily modern Hebrew settings, but settings where, and this seems to be the sense I'm getting from a number of you, you feel that your driving motivation is often tefillah, is prayer Hebrew, because we all feel this pressure of the carrot of bar and bat mitzvah, which is what often gets our folks in the door. And then we, those of us that care about Hebrew or want to expand the vision of Hebrew beyond the Siddur, have worked hard to infuse modern Hebrew into different spaces. So I want to start with this particular resource for a number of reasons. I don't know if any of you saw the article in yesterday's New York Times. I actually printed it out. I highly recommend it, and I can put the link in the chat or send it to Marianne afterwards, maybe with some other links that you could send out. It's called It's Life or Death, the Mental Health Crisis Among US Teens. It's a very powerful, very disturbing article about what's happening to our kids, what has happened to our kids as a result of the pandemic. And what I love about this tool, and I talk to Tal about it a lot, is it gives us a chance to check in with each child as they walk into the classroom. So this is a downloadable, everything I'm going to show you is a downloadable resource that allows us, as students walk into the room, how are you feeling today? And it gives them a whole host of reactions. You can see the poster down here that you can either order from us or print out. And it's a way of checking in, and the language is both what I call in my school high frequency language. These are words that actually appear in modern Hebrew a lot. One of my biggest bones of contention in many Hebrew programs that attempt to teach modern Hebrew is that we teach really esoteric modern Hebrew that really has no applicability. These are words that actually have applicability, and many of them also appear in Tefillah. So if you want to make that confluence between the language of Tefillah and the language of modern Hebrew, with the exception of Sababa, which you are not going to find in the Siddur, most of these words you can find in some practical way. In my school, I have these in every classroom at the entry, and the teachers welcome the students, ask them how they're feeling. At the beginning of the year, they're just pointing to the funny face that reflects how they feel. And at this point in the year, they know all the language and they can use it to describe their feelings. I don't know about all of you, but it's not really a joke, but it's a joke I've been making for the last 2 years, that I went into Jewish education as an educator, and I seem to be coming out of Jewish education as a public health nurse, a security expert, and a psychologist. That many of us are being called upon to do things that really were not part of our training. Or there might be some of you on the Zoom this morning who have actually come from mental health fields. So you actually are more skilled than I am, at least practically, in dealing with a lot of this. So this is a tool I really love to use because it really, kills two birds with one stone. It allows us to check in. In this state, at least, we are all mandatory reporters. And if we have a sense that a child is in crisis, this is a pretty simple way to find out if they are. And it's cute and it helps kids learn Hebrew. So I am a huge fan of this particular resource. The next one is, hold on, I have to reduce you guys so I can get to it. Hold on. This is something that we also have enjoyed infusing in our school. These are Israeli music playlists. I think we're going to talk about Infusion, but Infusion is really multisensory, and we know that our students learn in a variety of different ways. And for some students, maybe the only way to get them is that auditory, sensory experience, whereas for some kids that may be off-putting. You need to know your students, but having music playing, and this is all music that we have vetted, and it will say if it's for mature audiences. But, fun Israeli music, introducing our students to the fact that Hebrew can be learned in lots of different ways, including through music, which is something they are very aware of and committed to. It's where they live. So I just wanted to throw this up here. Another, come on, friends, let's go. Let's see, kill you, we're gonna kill you. This, all right. This is the landing page. So of a bunch of our resources. One of the things that we found kids lost in the pandemic were birthday parties, the ability to celebrate. They couldn't have their friends over, right? We saw a lot of Zoom birthdays. And we thought this was an opportunity, since they can't be in Israel to celebrate a birthday anyway, they can't be anywhere. Why not introduce the way in which birthdays are celebrated in Israel? And this resource has all kinds of ideas for things that you can bring into your classrooms, including Israeli birthday party games, ideas for decorations the kids can make. They could have a community siba lemesiba, a reason to celebrate, a Hebrew song playlist, and just how birthdays are celebrated. This is In my very strong opinion, it's very hard to separate Hebrew from Israeli culture. And it's important to introduce our students to Yisraeliyut in whatever way. The actual Israeli birthday song, as opposed to singing Yom Huledet Sameach to the American happy birthday song. And here are the games. As you can see, this is all branded with something called Israel at Camp. This was a significant initiative that we engaged in a number of years ago. Some of you may have even been involved in the Goodman camping initiative. If you ever worked at a camp, you may have been trained. This was a initiative to bring more Israel into what we call the historically Jewish camps. Those of you on the East Coast are probably the most familiar with those kinds of camps. These were camps that were formed as fresh air societies by Jewish organizations, but may not have a lot of Israel in them. They actually may not have a lot of Judaism in them. And this was our way of helping them sort of recapture, rekindle, reinfuse Judaism and Israel into the camping situation. Are there any questions so far? And if there are, tell me, because I can't see you. All right. And finally, I wanted to show you the resource page. Sorry, we're having a little technical difficulty here. And this is another resource, not iCenter related. I don't know if any of you have met Yara, but she came into being actually prior to the pandemic. I had never seen her before, but during the pandemic, a number of my teachers found her, and she is adorable. I'm just going to play a second.
Oh, I didn't see you there. Hello, welcome to Hebrew Weekly Words with me, Yara. And today's theme is, in your wallet. That's going to be a short one. So, wallet in Hebrew is arnak. Arnak. Here is my arnak. And okay, let's see what is the first word. רישיון נהיגה, driver's license. קיבלתי את רישיון הנהיגה שלי כשהייתי בת 17. I got my driver's license when I was 7.
So that's just a short taste. She has a whole series. She's charming. Our kids love her. They can't wait for Ya'ara time. And I highly recommended this and the other resources that I shared. You are welcome. I'm going to stop the share. You are welcome to, you guys see me? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
You are all right. You are welcome to go to the website, the iCenter website, or reach out to me at any time. I have this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I love bringing these kinds of resources because I don't know, I'm looking at the faces on the screens, the ones that I can see. Some of us all grew up in the same kind of Hebrew school setting where we had that little primer, the ba, ba, be. I see some of you laughing, you know what I'm talking about. It was very one-dimensional. Hebrew definitely did not come to life. For those of you who are interested, I wrote a piece called, as part of the Alphabet of Israel Education on Hebrew, and I talk about the piece that was above the ark in the synagogue I grew up in, that I read every single Shabbat my entire life. I had no idea what it meant. I then went to Israel for a year, came back, spoke Hebrew fluently after a year. I did not understand the language, but I spoke it and I could read it. And all of a sudden it came to life for me. And that aha moment was probably one of the most significant. I remember exactly where I was sitting in the synagogue when it happened. And that's the moment I want for our students, that moment where they own Hebrew. Lama Ivrit, because it's their inheritance. And it is, we entitled this Getting to Keyn, which is a little bit of a play on words. Getting to, yes, I can actually learn this language, and getting to I can learn this language. Because unfortunately, in the words of the late Leonard Fine, we are a group of Hebrews who don't speak Hebrew. And my goal for my students, for your students, for all of our students, is that we get to the point where Hebrew becomes something that we all feel that we own a piece of. Any questions?
Lauren?
Yeah.
Lori, I just want to share with you, Mark asked a question. When you're talking about something like a song, how do you balance reading versus learning by ear? I find myself often getting into debates with people just because I want to not just focus on decoding, i.e. you need to learn the birthday song by hearing it and not just by decoding it.
Yeah, so we are all, I think almost everyone on the screen is a product of the decoding methodology. That's how we were taught to learn Hebrew. We now know, and we know in English also, right? There have been, in my lifespan, there have been numerous approaches to teaching kids to read, right? Every couple of years, there's something newfangled that comes along, and this is the way children need to read. Now, we're going to have to completely evaluate this in so many ways because of, in large part, the pandemic, the loss of a year of learning, at least in this state where our kids were out of school for a year and a half, in-person school at least. And we know that their ability to concentrate has been impacted by the pandemic. We know their ability to focus has been impacted by the pandemic. In many ways, we have to sort of break the tools and rebuild them again and figure out what is going to capture the imagination of this generation of students who have been so deeply impacted. It also, for those of us who are in school leadership, we have to think about our teachers. This has been, they talk about the great resignation, right? Isn't that like the headline in magazines and newspapers everywhere? Jewish education is experiencing a horrendous great resignation. Both people in our positions, in leadership positions, as well as our faculty. I don't know how many of you have experienced the same thing we're experiencing in this area, but people have found teaching so unsatisfying that they are leaving, like they're finding everything unsatisfying and they're leaving. They want to find meaning. Our challenge is to strike a balance. And Mark, it's tough because we all have visual learners in our schools. We all have auditory learners in our school, and the population that we neglect the most in Jewish education are kinesthetic learners. I had one, meaning I had one as one of my own children. And I was struggling to find ways to help him, ended up getting stick pretzels and putting the letters in stick pretzels so he could build them and touch them. And that's how he learned Hebrew. So I think that we need to not abandon decoding because of course we want children to read, but just as we have put maybe less emphasis or perhaps in some schools, no emphasis on writing, right? How many of you have been in the position where you've had to abandon Hebrew writing? A lot. That's what I'm hearing nationwide. We don't have the time. It doesn't seem like such a critical skill. It's something that with a little motivation, someone could teach themselves in a few hours. I always think back to when I had to learn Rashi script for graduate school, and I literally sat for 24 hours and just made myself memorize it. If there's motivation, you're going to learn how to write Hebrew. It's not so difficult, but many of our school hours have been shut. I mean, mine were cut significantly during the pandemic. Thankfully, they've come back, but there's still a lot of damage. I believe that, going back to Mark's question, that this infusion of Hebrew in all different ways, both the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, making Israeli food, getting the instructions in Hebrew, learning those basic language, making it comprehensible. I can't emphasize that more. Tal's heard me tell this story before, I think, but one of the classic Hebrew books in the Chicago area, because 8 of our public high schools, 9, I think, teach Hebrew. So most of my kids graduate from my program and can attend a high school where Hebrew is a language option. One of those books, it was the Edna Amir Coffin University of Michigan book. I don't know if any of you, yes, Cindy's nodding. There's a huge story about Mitsudat Salbanim, the Crusader fortress in Akko. Now, I took a group of nifty teens to Israel, gosh, a long time, 25 years ago. And we're standing in Akko, and one of my students walked up to me and she said, I can finally use this word. This is the only place in the world I can use this word that I had to learn and study and be tested on. We should not be doing that. We should be choosing language that actually is pragmatic, is practical, is going to so that they're not going to be like me, who landed in Israel at the age of 17, and somebody at then Lod Airport asked me ma hasha'ah, which of course I knew what it meant, but I had no ability to respond. And that is what we have done over and over and over again. We have made choices that are not practical, and so they are perceived as a waste of time. And we know, we as the educators know, that language learning is really good for a child's brain development. And it is the case I make, particularly with those parents who didn't have a Jewish childhood. Why should I commit 5 hours a week to my child's Jewish education? And I give them the brain development speech, and they're like, oh, I get that. This is actually going to be really good for my child. Now, it may not be the reason we're doing it, but I tell you, whatever works. Anyway, any other questions?
All right, I just want to mark the brave soul who asked the question is getting a lot of answers. But I just want to say one more thing, which is the Lama can also help here. Why are you teaching the song? Is it to sing a song in Hebrew, or is it to work on reading skills? And both are okay, but you can certainly sing a song without reading. Yes, whatever you decide is the Lama, I think can help drive the decision that you make, and actually what happens in the classroom. And there, again, everything is, it's good. Again, our kavanah, our matara, our goal is to help you achieve what you and your community wants to get out of Hebrew. Hebrew is, it's yours. It's your students. And, and I think, Mark, that's a really good question, because we need to be asking, why am I teaching the song? Is it for the kids to sit together and sing and feel great in that moment? Or is this an exercise in decoding? Both are fine. They're just different.
Right. And there's a lot of debate out there right now with Onward Hebrew. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Onward Hebrew, about delaying decoding. There are many, many schools in the Chicago area, for example, that have made the decision to delay decoding to 5th grade. And it's just about being in a Hebrew environment, learning to speak Hebrew, speaking, sort of the na'aseh v'nishma, right? That you're actually doing Hebrew, you're actually engaging in Hebrew, and then you're going to learn how to actually read it, which is frankly almost the way I learned Hebrew, meaning I did know how to read it, but I learned to speak it long before I understood how the language worked. And I don't think that was a bad thing. It was just the order in which it happened for me. And frankly, I think the order in which it happens for any student and works does not matter. And you all are in the positions of making these significant decisions for your communities. And we know, I know, having been in the trenches for so many years, that we often feel this pressure from our rabbis, from our B'nai Mitzvah tutors. They're the ones who give us like that immediate feedback. I'm working with these students and they don't know Hebrew the way they used to, right? How many of you got those comments this year? I got it. And, I have a significant Hebrew program. My kids come for Hebrew alone 3 hours a week. But the pandemic affected that significantly, and the kids were less motivated to learn anything, let alone Hebrew, which did not feel very practical or pragmatic because they weren't walking in the door of the synagogue. How many of our kids were using Hebrew at home? So to learn something that had absolutely no applicability in their real lives was, we say in Hebrew, a bracha levatala, truly a wasted blessing. And the challenge so many of us are facing right now is that we are trying to bring them back into these environments where Hebrew is relevant, where it is connected to all these parts of their identities. I was so happy to see so many of you write about that, because I think that my Jewish identity, I grew up traditionally Jewish more or less in a small town where my parents worked really hard to forge our Jewish identity. All of my friends went to Jewish camp. All of us went to Israel. All of us married Jews. Like, it was like a little bubble. It was our own version of whatever happened to the class of 65. But now we're dealing with so much outside stuff, significantly, and most importantly, this, which distracts them, but also can be leveraged as a tool. And teachers who have figured out ways to leverage these lovely devices, which can be our greatest challenges and our greatest tools, are finding real success in the classroom, giving kids the opportunity to bring different parts of their lives together under the umbrella of Hebrew.
Lori, I just want to share that in the chat, I'm not going to read it all, but there's a conversation between two participants, Cindy and Lisa,
Right, I'm seeing that
about when we should start decoding. And this is a perfect example of the importance of our determining your particular institution's Lama Ivrit, because how would you know to answer these questions? How would you know how critical decoding is and when it should come into play unless you were able to articulate what you would like your students to do at the end, throughout and at the end of their experience with you. So again, I want to purposefully not share my, this is Tal. So not share my personal feelings or thoughts, because I really think it's so important that you, this is the case for Lama Ivrit. There are answers if you can identify and articulate where you want to go. And I just want to say it shouldn't be too scary, because you can change where you want to go to. You just need to say where you want to go right now.
I have evolved so much over the years, so I completely agree with you, Tal. And the question I always ask myself when I'm trying to figure out what should be part of my school curriculum, although I'm not sure curriculum is actually the right word, is what do I want a student who graduates from my program to look like? What skills should they have? And how do I want them to navigate the world? What tools are we going to infuse them with that are going to help them navigate the world? And I think that for me has always been a really helpful organizing principle as I sit down over the summer and decide what's going to be in, what's going to be out, what special programs we're going to do, where is our emphasis going to be, what is, if we're going to have a theme, what that's going to be, is what do I want a child who, depending on how late your school goes, I think about a kid graduating high school, what do I want them to leave here with? And what tools do I want them to have? Because clearly I can't give them everything, but if I can also provide them with this baseline knowledge and the tools for knowing where to go and get more, then I think that for me, that is, I feel like, I've done my job. All right, back to you.
Thank you. I just want to thank you, Lori. I just want to, Dina asks, shares that a quandary about, after decoding, where do you what kind of text do you share? Like what is the interim between the decoding and the sidul? And I'll just say two things, and Dina, I'm happy to touch base later and maybe even share a few resources, or Lori may have even better resources.
Or
I
Dina's
think-
written them. Dina's
Or
like
Dina's
the
written.
master.
But I think that the long, and maybe Dina, you could even provide us with some answers. But I would say that fundamentally, it comes back to Lama Ivrit, finding texts that are relevant to our students, and that are at their level of proficiency, +1. So there is some formula to choose those texts. There are texts available, but to tell you that I can just send you a PDF with 10 of them, we're not there yet. Maybe that's our next shared endeavor with this group. I am going to share with you just now I'm going to share with you right now in the chat just the link to the Hebrew for What conceptual framework. I just put the whole document is there, and if you'll see on page 50, the chart is there. I do want to share with you, if you're agreeable, one more tool that may be helpful in this idea, and Lori has kind of shared, has mentioned this concept a few times of Hebrew infusion. So just in בקצה המזלג, על רגל אחת, on one foot, I will say that, if we're looking at a continuum of Hebrew, and again, I want to be very specific to our settings here, which are, supplementary school. These are not day schools. This is not a camp. This is a very specific setting. If we had a scale from affinity, which is like the relationship to Hebrew on one end, and acquisition and proficiency on the other end, there is something in the middle that we call infusion. And here I have to credit Sharon Avni and Benor, who have published a book called Hebrew Infusion, which happens to focus on camp specifically, but we believe gives us a tool for all educational settings. Hebrew Infusion is what it sounds like. The infusing, Sharon Avni describes it as, when you have like a infuser and you have fruit in it, and then you put some water in it, the fruit infuses into the water. Have you guys seen that? Maybe just because I'm from Los Angeles, California, we do these kinds of crazy things. But so the idea here is, how do you infuse Hebrew? And I find that in supplementary schools, this is maybe one of the most, I think it's a good framework to think about. As you can see, I'm into frameworks. So I just want to, given our limited time, I wanted to share with you this idea. If we look at Hebrew Infusion, we've done some work with this team who wrote this book, and we've divided the infusion into 4 buckets. One is Hebrew language, which is what can I actually do in the language? What can I communicate? How proficient I am, what's my fluency in reading? Those are like the tachlit, second language acquisition pieces. But there's 3 more buckets that are really important in, or can be important in our work. One is Hebrew and Israeli culture. I refer to Lori's example that she shared with us, the music. The question now about what texts, what text do we choose to read with students, that also, where do we infuse Israel or Hebrew culture in North America into the experience? Linguistic landscapes. What do we hear and what do we see? And what do we, I call it landscape and soundscape in this experience. So if you're in a classroom, how are you able to leverage that? Not everything has to be direct. What's in the background? What are the indicators on the walls? What is it playing in the background? While you may want to, on some songs, you want to teach them how to sing. Some songs you want to teach them how to decode. And some songs you just want to play so that when they hear it, they feel it's fun and they love to be in Hebrew. Those are all good reasons to have a song. So linguistic landscape and meta-linguistic discussion, which is the 4th bucket, which is really about talking about Hebrew. allowing people, again, if one is proficient in Hebrew, one can do this in Hebrew, but most of our students are not. But the importance of actually having that conversation about what does Hebrew mean to you? Where do you find connection to Hebrew? And to leave it in, and to listen, and to find those entry points. So I want to offer this as I, for example, will use this particular slide as an activity with a staff, and explore together, as an institution, what buckets are we filling, and what buckets should we be paying more attention to? Or what bucket do we want to focus on in this year because we have limited resources? Again, there are no right or wrong answer. This is just another framework for you to think about how you can leverage Hebrew, Ivrit in your school. And again, it all comes back to the Lama Ivrit. So I know that there's so many questions about Hebrew. When do we start teaching to read and write? Do we write? How much time should be spent on this? Do we talk, is it Ivrit be'Ivrit or is it Ivrit ve'Anglit? Like, there are so many good, important questions, and they can be answered if we answer our individual.
Did everyone else just lose Tal?
Yes.
Questions, or we kind of articulate.
All right, we lost you for a
Um,
second, Tal. So just
sorry.
you might want to backtrack a bit.
Sorry, I apologize. I just wanted to say it's a wonderful opportunity to give Ivrit the kavod that I think she deserves. And Ivrit is a wonderful tool for us. It's ours, it's mine. And if we can get our students to feel that way, dayenu. I do want to take just a few minutes. Lori is going to kind of help close our session and share a few of our conclusions and kind of help bring this conversation to a close. So Lori.
Thank you. So this, I can't talk right now. Thank you. Tal, if you could populate the, there we go. So this was an hour. We know this was clearly not enough time. We could spend days having this conversation, and God willing, in the next future period of time, we will be able to bring a group of you together to have deeper conversations about Ivrit and sort of charting the course for the future. But one of the things, so we believe it's really important to have a shared Hebrew mission in supplementary complementary schools. It's critical for making effective decisions about everything from setting expectations for students, building positive Hebrew experiences, and I would also add setting expectations for parents, because we are all at the whim of our parents, right? This is a voluntary organization. We mostly sit at the heads of voluntary organizations. Parents can choose or not choose to be part of us. We need to engage them in the conversation. Some may have some really valuable things to share. Others may need to be brought along with us, but we need to feel confident in our mission. And I would urge everyone to spend some time, once school is out in the next few weeks, really thinking about what is it you want in your school? What is the mission that you are looking to create and accomplish in your school, involving constituents? So the parents, I think, are key and are important. Our other professional colleagues. Hebrew may not be something that a lot of them spend their time thinking about, but that doesn't mean that our executive directors, our program directors, our youth advisors don't have important things to share with us on this topic. So I would strongly urge sort of a collective conversation about Lama Ivrit. Focusing on student attitudes and motivation provides internal incentives towards continued Hebrew learning and Jewish education. We have to work hard on this now, harder probably than we ever have had to before. But what I'm finding, and I don't know if others out there are finding this, my kids want to be here. After a year and a half of being away from Hebrew school, away from Jewish education, they came running back. I had to make up jobs for my machoneks, my teacher's aides, because I had a school of 180 kids and I had 35 of them that wanted to come and volunteer. I made up all kinds of jobs because they just wanted to be here. They want to be in community. Those are great opportunities to do, professional development for them, doing a Hebrew immersion experience, having someone come in and teach like a hip Hebrew song to them that they can then share with their friends. The Hebrew education doesn't end when Hebrew school ends. And creating an inclusive and supporting experience is critical for allowing a sense of belonging and lays the foundation for the development of a strong Jewish identity. I land in the Jewish identity space with Hebrew. Their parents ask me all the time, what over the last many years, what are the guarantees that my kid is going to grow up and want to be Jewish? And we all know there are no guarantees, right? We can't lay out the things they must do that will guarantee. But truly, I believe that Jewish camping, a strong Jewish education, and Israel experience are about as close as we can get to guarantees in our world. And the more a child is connected to Hebrew and Israel and Judaism, the more likely they are going to want to continue that trajectory for the rest of their lives. We are here, Tal and I and our colleague Cindy's on this call, and I think Liad is also here somewhere. We have an amazing team at Hebrew at the Center who are at the ready, wanting to support you, want to sit and have those conversations with you. We enjoy these conversations. So if you're looking for thought partners, we are them. Thank you all for being here today. This has been just, I feel so, as Tal and Marian know, I am just getting over COVID, and you have brought me back to life. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lori and Tal, and thank you, Lori, for giving us the privilege of seeing Techiyat HaMeitim, the rejuvenation of life in our time. But thank you both, such a motivating and inspirational session, and also with lots of practical tips. I want to assure everybody that our Connection Hebrew College and Hebrew at the Center, it's just at the beginning stages, and we look forward to doing many more professional development sessions with Hebrew at the Center, especially targeted to the supplementary congregational school world and the Kesher kind of world that Tal invoked early on. So please stay tuned. So wonderful to have you here this morning. And also please note our next and last session of the year is on May 24th, and it's going to be a dive into the challenge of tefillah. So no one can say that we stay away from the hard, challenging questions. We tackle them head on and hope that for all of you, it's a moment of inspiration and growth for yourselves that you can bring back to your congregations and staff and lay people. So thank you all. Have a great rest of the day. And if anyone has a kind of question or anything, I'm happy to stay on for a couple of minutes. Hi, Cindy. Gina, are you still on? I want you, Tal and Lori should know, Gina and I went to the same elementary day school, and her sister Alea Hashalom was in my class. So I didn't know that Gina was in Jewish education, but good to see everybody. Cindy, good to see you.
I just want to, first of all, Gina is the education director at my synagogue, and I sent her the link. So I'm really glad to see that she joined us today. And Lori, were you at Hebrew University on the one-year program in 79, 80?
Cindy, you and I were on one-year program together.
I did not know that. Lisa Tannenbaum just texted me that.
Yes, I remember you. I have pictures of you, actually.
Was
I
your
will
last
Lori-
name Sagarin?
What, my last name was Baumblatt.
Baumblatt. Okay, Lori Baumblatt. I was Cindy Cohen.
I have pictures of you. I
Okay.
remember you. And I obviously remember Lisa. Lisa, I think, lives in my area. We were supposed to get together and then the pandemic hit.
Cool.
I'm hoping
Lori,
we will
this is-
still do that. That was quite a
Okay.
year of my life.
Mine too.
Mar-